All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today on Linkspring and Tritium together since 1999. I'm Mark Peacock. I'm the Chief Marketing and Communication Officer at Linkspring. And again, we appreciate you joining. A few housekeeping items. Yes, we are recording this and we'll make it link available for those of you who are interested and for your colleagues who may have missed it. We are asking 3 poll questions during this webinar, and there's a little hint for you there. Are you currently using Niagara 4.9? Are you familiar with Linkspring's Niagara IP horizontal architecture? Do you currently deploy BACnet configurable application-specific controllers? Troy will pop those poll questions up. And also kind of our agenda today, and if you have questions, enter them into the Q&A section. And if we can't get to them, we will respond back to you after the webinar, and just contact marketing@linkspring.com. Joining me today, I'm delighted to have Troy Finley, Business Development Manager at Tritium, and the guy we at Linkspring give a hard time to each and every day, and sometimes multiple times a day. And as well as Kevin Mamachek, who's the Senior Systems Engineer at Tritium. We're going to cover 3 distinct topics: relationship history, Tritium's view of Linkspring, and then Kevin's going to take a little dive into Niagara 4.9. Next slide. So 22 years. Can you believe that? Linkspring and Tritium have been together for 22 years. How did this all start? Back in 1999, Terry Swope, who's the Linkspring founder and CEO, many of you know him, formed an integration group at his then engineering firm to bring integration into the world of engineering, building integration. And from that, he found the Niagara platform and decided that Niagara was to become the core solution platform for this integration business. Lo and behold, Terry left that organization, and in 2002 formed Linkspring, and Linkspring became an official Tritium Niagara distributor. As time progressed, back in 2004, Linkspring moved from a distributor to one of the very first original equipment manufacturers, or OEMs, for Tritium. Moving on, Kevin. 2005, what a banner year between the 2 organizations. Here, we collaborated in the design and the development of Niagara X and the Generation 2 Jace. For those of you who have been utilizing Niagara for a long time, you will recall that Generation 2, the Jace, or our brand, the Jenny, looked like, and it was referred to as the brick. Also in 2005, we delivered, meaning Linkspring delivered, the very first Generation 2 prototype controller on the market. We were the first company within the Linkspring organization to adopt the Niagara AX platform. And a sort of a side bet. You want to know why the reason the Jace came out with 34IO, it was because of Linkspring's requirement that we had for an OEM customer. It would not have been that 34IO, it would have been something else if it wasn't our co-development and our feedback to Tritium on why it needed to be a 34IO. Also, we helped develop the first stack, or excuse me, we divided the core stack. So it enhanced the scalability and the market opportunities in which the Niagara platform could be utilized. And during that same time, we were one of the first authorized Niagara trainers and also one of the first authorized developers on the platform. Next. In 2006, we introduced the Genesis controller to the market at that year's ASHRAE. We secured and we became, at that time, the only OEM authorized to manufacture Jace and Jenny controllers. Moving on to 2008, we launched the Genesis the PC-LCD Niagara controller, the first of its kind, and still remains one of the first of its kind in the industry. In 2014, we further extended our relationship with Tritium, in which we were designated as a master system distributor. And that designation is, there's only a few within Tritium and Tritium's customer base and partner world that have that distinction. In 2006, we became the very first company to port the Niagara framework. And in 2017, we released the first ported Niagara framework device, the Genesis Edge 534, which many of you are familiar with. 2019, we launched and brought to market the Niagara Edge enabled portfolio of controllers and modules. And last year, 2020, we introduced the very first Niagara horizontal architecture and typology. So again, lots of good things over the 22-year period. Now I'm going to turn it over to Troy. He's going to tell us a little more insight into Tritium and LinkSpring and from Tritium's perspective. Troy?
Mark, thank you. And hope everybody can see and hear me. Is everything coming through okay? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Again, welcome everybody. It's a tremendous honor for Kevin and me to be invited to join you today. Really what's the first of hopefully several webinars over the course of this year to come in this new mode of doing business together. But again, it's exciting. Over 150 participants on the webinar today. And after owning the primary responsibility at Tritium for the last 6 years of this awesome partnership and for having the responsibility to grow that partnership, it's rewarding to reflect on a snapshot of the accomplishments. Mark, gosh, it's hard to do 20-year history in 5 minutes, but it's also a good opportunity at the beginning of a new year to get excited about the future, right? And there's so many exciting opportunities in the connected building space and the building automation industry for us to look forward to in the coming year and years to come. So it's in that vein that I want to highlight over the next 2 minutes the why, the what, and the how that define and galvanize this impactful partnership. When you look at why this partnership is so important to Tritium, it's really centers on LinkSpring's approach to consistently pushing Tritium to new heights. And because LinkSpring remains singularly committed to its Niagara-centric approach to the market, and it just holds on to that strategy so strongly that they're like no other top-tier Tritium partner in that regard. And the best example I have of that is how LinkSpring really pushed Tritium to bring Niagara portability to the market about 3 years ago. They had been pushing for that ability years before I joined Tritium back in 2015. And the push for that ability, that technical ability and that contractual ability for them to do that really took Tritium and Niagara to new heights, right? They were the first partner in the world to port Niagara to their own hardware devices. And And there's just so many exciting developments that will come from that, and that have already come from that. That's just one example of many how LinkSpring pushes Tritium, and it's that symbiotic relationship that's so powerful. When you look at the what is accomplished by this partnership, you see tremendous positive impact in the building automation industry. Just look at the employee base and the folks who lead from an executive perspective the LinkSpring organization. The founders of LinkSpring are still involved heavily. The executive bench is deep. You know, look at Mark Peacock, a grandfather essentially of the building automation space, and you look across the mid-level and frontline managers and those on the front lines at LinkSpring. They're all industry veterans, and so it's exciting to be in that company as the owner of this relationship and this partnership. Really, what it exemplifies LinkSpring's position in the market and with Tritium is the fact that LinkSpring consistently places on the top 5 list of Tritium partners based on revenue, and really it's beyond the revenue marker that LinkSpring places in that category. But when you think about the company they keep in that top 5 list, each of those companies on that list are Fortune 100 global industrial companies, right? Been around for 100 years, bringing in billions of dollars of revenue. So LinkSpring in the top 5 list of what we accomplish from a revenue perspective as Tritium across an annual time frame is just incredible. And when you look at the how this partnership remains so impactful, it's really LinkSpring's unending passion for driving innovation. When I think about the DNA of LinkSpring, I think about the thing that comes to mind is just their passion to drive innovation in this space. They just get excited about driving this industry to new levels, and both for their partners and end customers, right? And when you couple that with Tritium's passion for maintaining Niagara's market-leading position as the #1 edge-to-cloud platform in the building automation space, that's a powerful partnership that comes to bear there. So with that, let's get into product discussion. I don't want to carry on too much, but I could go on for a long time here. But LinkSpring brings a lot of feedback from its partner and end customers to how Niagara should develop in terms of feature sets in its new versions. So Kevin, Kevin Mamachek, who can drive Niagara like no one I know, is going to walk us through what we have with 4.9. And with that, let's launch a couple of the first 2 polls here just to get a little feedback from the attendees here. So let's see here. Let me launch the first poll question here. Are you familiar with, or are you currently running and or promoting Niagara 4.9? So let that run for a few minutes to grab some response. And we'll throw another question as you get ready, Kevin.
Unlike you, I can hear myself on your speaker, so I'll be quiet. Unlike you, though, who've repainted your house and put that nice little Tritium logo up there, I'm only outside in Alaska in a tent.
Good. So I'll end that poll. We'll get to, let's get to the next one and get into some product discussion here. How many of you are familiar with LinkSpring's Niagara IP horizontal architecture? Results are pouring in here, and appreciate your feedback, and let that run a few minutes. I think we've got most of the answers. And with that, Kevin, let's get into a discussion of 4.9.
All right, sounds good. All right, so a colleague of mine, she was talking about how can you reference something that's improved if you have no idea where the customer stood in previous versions? So she actually put together this wonderful roadmap of where we've come. I'm not going to dive into every detail, but I've highlighted a few things that show you how the directions over time have been kind of steered by our customer base, right? And so when you look at Niagara, we got a huge thing in the influx of the new internet standards to go HTML5. And so you'll see that with Niagara 4, that was the beginning of our journey of moving everything over to HTML5. We have role-based access, right? All of these things that we expect today, where they started. But as we move through that Niagara journey from 2015 all the way to where we are today, and I'll get into that on the next slide, you need to look at how we've built on top of that framework and added additional features and security. So a lot of things that I call out is to understand what we've done for you, our customers, on security and access. Like in 4.3, we added LDAP services, right? So our enterprise customers don't want to put their users and groups on the Jace or the supervisor. They want to put them in their IT infrastructure. So a lot of those components get built in. I'll also call out in 4.3 tag rules. I have a whole YouTube series on analytics, and tags are important. So that was an early on addition that I just frankly didn't know about until I started talking to you guys and found out that, you know, when you create tags and you create these rules, you can save a lot of time, and it helps a lot of enterprises. So these are all improvements that have been in the versions. You have to kind of look at where your customer is, and then you can kind of scope out, wow, there's so much more that we can do with Niagara. System database like in 4.6, and templates and how to create templates and how to then provision using templates, more HTML type stuff as we work through the years. So you'll find that in 4.7, we introduced this a new type of device, which we'll talk about more in the later slides, which allows us to create a additional runtime engine inside the Jace. And so one of the things that we want to do on the edge controllers is we wanted to be able to have a super fast startup, like with, 10 seconds, not a couple minutes, right? With the Jace that boots. So 4.7 was the underlying foundation to that. And then 4.8 started to build out as these devices are created, and you'll see LinkSpring is creating one. We needed to figure out how to manage them because they're small, lightweight edge controllers that can go and do several things. So 4.8 has a whole, foundation of how to kind of manage all those little devices, plus security dashboards and things of that nature that are super important for IT. So 4.8 was a lot of plumbing. And then you'll see as we move on to 4.9, which we'll talk about today, we build on that plumbing and add some additional improvements. So we found that when we looked at a lot of our, and I'll get into that in 4.9. And then here's a little kind of preview with 4.10, and we'll talk about that. But there's a new release coming in the spring that is going to add some additional features that build on, again, the tags and the security and so forth. So with that, let's kind of dive into what are the major enhancements with 4.9. And so this is kind of a real quick summary of how we've added things to visualization. We've added things to the development. That hint that I talked about with the ACE engine, we looked at some security features that our customers were struggling with. So we looked at how we can make those easier. We were getting inundated with asks. So how do we connect a Niagara system to a cloud that has a set of databases that they might want to be populating with? And we looked at how do we support the existing IT infrastructure, what operating system, what browsers are out there. That's one of those things that usually every release, we kind of step back and look to see where the industry is. So one of the things that I was pretty excited about is once I started to realize what tag rules do, and I have a little Niagara Pro tips on how to create a rule, but they're pretty fascinating. Once I create a rule, I can create a rule like on a naming convention, and it will go and auto tag my data. What's nice about this new piece in 4.9 is the tags used to be only used for searching for points in a database, or it would be used to run some analytics, right? And if you're not deploying the analytics, the tags weren't really valuable, right? So now with the tags and the rules, we've started to implement more ways to use them within the Niagara framework. And so one of the ways is we were getting a lot of requests from customers is how can we simplify creating a PX page that allows you to repurpose it in other systems relatively quickly. And if you've designed a PX page, you know you have to put this ORD in that talks about where the data is. Like if I have a set point, I have a ORD that says, oh yeah, it's in the drivers and it's in BACnet and it's over there. Now you can create relativized PX pages, which I do a lot, right? That way I know it's, you know, somewhere within this folder where I put the PX page, but I have to kind of think through that. Now with 4.9, we have the ability to actually put a tag for that location of that particular temperature that you're looking for. And what's nice with that tag is I can find that information relatively quickly. I can grab it, put it in, and then display it. And all of that with the tag means I can repurpose these PX pages all over the place without any additional recoding because it's looking for the data within that tag. So this is pretty powerful. It's something that several of you guys have been asking for. We just had to, you know, create the infrastructure for it to actually go out and address those tags within the PX. So this is one of these things where you'll see we have a Tritium talk up there talking about it. You're going to see me talk about how I'm going to use this within my Niagara Pro Tips. And then there's a free university module because tagging, again, I can't overemphasize tagging. It's one of those things that once you take the initiative to figure out how to tag your data and have it auto tag with the rules, it opens up all kinds of great possibilities with engineering. So we alluded to the ACE engine. So this is a one of these things where we created a reference device and then we worked on how that reference device will work with this new engine. And then we now allow our third parties, such as LinkSpring, to actually take that new engine, that new runtime, and then insert it into their Niagara devices. So what was kind of a concept, we kind of had to use 2 generations of, or 2 releases of Niagara to get it up and running. We're now in the position where you'll start to see like LinkSpring support this. And again, this is, when you look at what ACE is, it's a deterministic runtime, or I call it like fast startup. I had a, you know, a traffic light in my cube to tell you if I was there or not, and it would flip and so forth. And I would essentially, if it was on the Jace and I was doing maintenance on the Jace and I had to reboot it, that stoplight would go down for a few minutes, right? With this, when I converted it over to the ACE engine, if I recycled that power or I did any updates, the Jace side Niagara boots and then the ACE engine starts up immediately. And in 10 seconds, my stoplight's back up and running. So this is, again, a critical piece that when you look at the infrastructure of what you're trying to connect, this is an important piece to the puzzle that will allow you to put some fast response type edge devices in there. And then once we had that edge device concept and that new runtime, we had to step back and say, oh, okay, wait a minute. Now, these devices, there's going to be lots of them, right? How do I manage them? How do I provision them? If I have a couple thousand of them I have to provision, I don't want to touch those individually. So we created a new set of tools within our provisioning services to actually address those, right? How do I take a hold of one of these edge devices, get it to auto boot into a provisioning mode so that I can, you know, I just line them all up and connect them to the network. And then it just goes down and individually grabs a hold of them and runs this routine within the provisioning software, right? So if I have to grab it, get a certificate, get it to send me the certificate, get it signed, all of that's automated to allow me to get to that process. And also the ACE has this concept of an application that is now templatable. So in Niagara, you know, we have the templates, which I can manage in an enterprise. This takes it a step higher in that I can actually have the entire application, that entire application configuration folder as a template, and I can swap pieces in and out of it. So it's becoming very powerful on how we can auto provision these types of things. And this toolbox is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So we're pretty excited about that. I've seen several customers struggle with single sign-on. we now have a Niagara only single sign-on module that makes it much easier to set that up. So essentially, if I have a supervisor that has a couple thousand Jaces in it, right? And I have the same credentials across the entire network. Prior to this, every time I connected to a new Jace, I would have to enter in my credentials. With single sign-on, you create the zone of trust, and now all of a sudden I log in once, and then any of those subsequent devices below, it won't ask me for the credentials because it already knows I have them and I've been authenticated. So we've seen the struggles with customers wanting this. We've kind of created a single sign-on or IDP within Niagara's space so that you can set it up much easier. So this is not an external IDP. That was a lot of the complication was using these external IDPs. So part of a push from, again, with the general things of the way the internet is we were getting a lot of requests from enterprises to have a dedicated security log. So today in versions prior to 4.9, it was one audit log, and the audit log, if I changed the temperature, I was audited and I was in there. If I log in, my login credentials were not the credentials, but it said that I logged in. So what they wanted was that separate. So now we have a separate security log so that anytime a person audits or changes a password or things of that nature, all of that's in a separate log file. So that was one of the things that our customers were asking for. And when you start to couple that with the security dashboard that we started to ship in 4.8, it gives you a really nice picture of how your Jaces are set up, what vulnerabilities that might still be there, what super users are on some of these Jaces that you didn't know about, right? So all of this is an important thing out there. When you look at security again, and you'll keep seeing every release has more and more security because as an industry, we have to make sure the platform is secure, and we find things and we fix things and we build new things in to help that security posture. One of the things that we've been kind of pushing for the last few years is getting your third-party modules signed. So since the inception of the Jace with Niagara 4, we sign our code, right? The Jace won't boot if you don't have the operating system and all of the Niagara signed, right? So that we've been doing that. What we're doing now is saying to our third parties that create modules, you need to start signing those. And so 4.8, we just kind of yelled at you in the console. No one really knew. You just, if you looked at the console, you're like, oh yeah, I have a bunch of things that are doing it. 4.9, we've flipped the switch to allow it to now stop. So it's going to give you a moment of pause. Doesn't mean we keep it there. You can actually push it back down to low, but we needed to start getting the awareness to the customers that you need to sign these. And it's important you do that because it creates a wrapper around these apps to make sure they're not tampered with. And that's super important. Someday we might flip the switch where it won't run it and we can't turn it down. So again, LinkSpring signs there, so you're in good shape, right? So enabling cloud connectivity. So we've rolled out MQTT for a while. So that is now with the 4.9, we've added the Amazon web service authentication component to that. And then we also now include, as long as you have the software maintenance license, the JSON toolkit. And so what's powerful about the JSON toolkit is we had customers are like, help us create the packets to talk to the cloud. So is there a way of using a tool within Niagara to make that process a lot easier? And so that JSON toolkit is now included with 4.9. Just some real quick overview of infrastructure. And then again, this is on the website, so you don't have to worry about that. But we, you heard that word in engineering and coding, we deprecate, we don't support this anymore. And when you look at what we've deprecated, it's essentially just old stuff that Microsoft doesn't support anymore or Red Hat doesn't support anymore. So this is not a surprise. It's pretty much following what's happening in the industry, and we just follow suit. But we've also added things, right, into our support, right? So the servers for Red Hat, the Oracle databases, right? So we've taken some of those newer versions that they offer and put them into that support component of that. So, but wait, there's one more thing, and I'm pretty close on time here. And this is something tiny, but it's like, oh, finally, I have a lot of manufacturing that want to hit the weather service, and it actually is now using HTTPS. And so prior to any enterprise that had a proxy server, you couldn't get to that weather service because our proxy server service inside the Jace wouldn't do HTTPS. So as soon as the web service from the government web server made the connection unencrypted, it flipped it to encrypted, and you couldn't get the weather anymore. So I'm happy to say they fixed the proxy server on our Niagara. So all of my enterprise customers that go through enterprise IT proxies will stop telling me they can't get their weather. So that is all it. One small plug, Niagara Pro Tips on YouTube. We take a lot of the details like tags and rules and break it down into something that is easily ingestible in about 4 minutes. So this will help kind of give you some more information on those things. And then as these seminars continue, we can take topics and kind of deep dive down into them. So I will turn it back to Troy and Mark.
Thanks, Kevin. We've got one more poll question. Troy, would you get that last question up for us, please? Maybe we're having, there we go.
Oh, there it goes.
There you go. So do you currently deploy BACnet application specific controllers? Would love to hear your feedback on that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. My thanks to both Troy and Kevin. Appreciate your time and the great content you provided. Again, as we mentioned, join us next Wednesday, same time, 11 o'clock a.m. Central Time, in which, in this case, we're going to put it almost the whole burden on Kevin to give us a sneak peek and open up that hood, look under the hood of the next release of Niagara 4.10, which all of us are anticipating sometime in the springtime. Again, if you've got any questions, need any assistance from Linkspring, reach out to marketing@linkspring.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time. With that, have a great day and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. I'll end the recording now and it will be available online as a follow-up.